Ethan thought his life was finally settling into place. He had a stable job, a quiet apartment, and a wedding date marked on the calendar. He believed the family he was about to join welcomed him with open arms. But that night at the dinner table, everything shifted. A single folder slid toward him, wrapped in polite smiles and hidden intentions. Inside, it was a demand he never saw coming. The air thickened as he realized the room wasn't filled with love, but with expectation. Not emotional expectation, but financial calculation. Their voices stayed soft, but the trap was steel. His role in their future had already been written, and he wasn't part of it as a partner. He was simply the funding. The realization hit him so hard he forgot to breathe. That dinner wasn't about planning a wedding. It was the beginning of a revelation that would destroy everything he thought he knew. Ethan sat at the table, with a polite smile frozen on his face. He still didn't understand why Madison's parents insisted on this formal discussion. Her father cleared his throat with the kind of authority that didn't invite questions. A thick envelope appeared in front of Ethan, as if it had been rehearsed. He felt the first sting of unease crawl up his spine. Madison didn't look confused or surprised. She looked expectant. Her mother folded her hands like someone waiting for a signature, not a conversation. Ethan opened the envelope with steady hands that didn't match the pounding in his chest. Inside was a printed document with bold letters at the top. Financial Integration Covenant. The title alone made his stomach drop. He read the first line twice, thinking he misunderstood. He didn't. The agreement required him to transfer all his post-tax income into a joint account, controlled solely by Madison's father. Not shared. Not combined. Controlled. In return, Ethan would receive a fixed allowance of $1,200 per month. The number looked insulting in ink. It felt even worse when spoken aloud by Madison's father. He explained it as if it were normal, as if it were tradition, as if Ethan should be grateful for the arrangement. Ethan looked at Madison, expecting her to defend him. She didn't. She nodded slowly, like this was the natural next step in their relationship. Her smile was tight, but it wasn't apologetic. It was encouraging. She wanted him to sign. Her mother chimed in with a gentle tone that barely masked her impatience. She spoke about family unity and financial alignment. Every phrase sounded like a polished lie. Ethan forced himself to keep reading. The deeper he went, the worse it became. He wasn't just surrendering his income. He was surrendering control of his savings, his investments, his emergency funds, every dollar he had earned for years. All of it would be absorbed into their so-called family financial ecosystem. He read a clause that chilled him more than the rest. Any attempt to withdraw funds without permission would be considered a breach of trust, a violation, a threat to the stability of the household. He felt his jaw tighten. His pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't unity. This wasn't partnership. This was ownership. And he was the asset. Madison leaned closer and whispered that it would help them plan long-term. Her voice was soft. Her eyes were firm. She was convinced this was the right path. Or she needed it to be. Ethan swallowed hard as her father slid a pen across the table. The gesture was final. Casual. Predictable. Like they already knew his answer. He realized in that moment they didn't see him as Madison's future husband. They saw him as their financial foundation, their stability, their solution. And all he had to do was sign away his entire life. Ethan held the pen between his fingers, pretending to study the document one last time. His heartbeat was a steady roar behind his ribs. No one at the table noticed the shift in his breathing. They were too focused on the signature line, waiting for his name. Madison's father leaned back with the confidence of a man who believed the deal was sealed. Her mother whispered something about responsibility and future security. Madison rested her hand on his arm, gently pushing the pen closer. Ethan forced a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said he needed a moment to get a better pen from the living room. The family nodded with rehearsed patience. They believed he was already theirs. He stood up slowly, so he wouldn't betray the adrenaline rushing through him. The moment he turned away from the table, his expression collapsed into something sharp and cold. He walked past the living room, then past the hallway, then straight to the front door. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. He slipped outside as quietly as someone escaping a burning building. The night air hit him like water. He took the deepest breath he'd taken in weeks. He unlocked his car with shaking hands. The moment he started the engine, the weight of the evening began to unravel. He wasn't just leaving a dinner. He was leaving a trap. On the drive home, his mind raced through every detail of their plan. Every smile, every lie, every expectation. By the time he reached his apartment, he knew exactly what he had to do. He went inside and sat at his desk with the precision of someone on a mission. He opened his bank account and removed Madison from every joint access point. He froze the shared savings plan they had opened months ago. He canceled the secondary credit card he had given her without a second thought. Then he contacted the venue and revoked his reservation. He terminated the catering contract. He sent formal cancellations to every vendor tied to the wedding. He took screenshots of receipts, emails, and confirmations. He documented everything. Every click felt like a hinge, closing on a door he would never open again. He checked the clock. Barely an hour had passed since he walked out of the house. He wondered if they noticed yet, if they were still waiting for him to return with the pen. The thought almost made him laugh. He gathered his personal files and closed the laptop with a steady exhale. He wasn't done. He drove to the bank to close the joint account completely. The teller raised an eyebrow, but processed the request without question. Ethan walked out feeling lighter than he had in months. Back home, he placed every document, every receipt, every screenshot into a single folder. A record of the night he refused to be purchased. He stared at the folder for a long moment. Then he whispered to himself the truth that kept him moving forward. They had expected him to sign away his life. Instead, he had signed his freedom back to himself. The first voicemail came at dawn. Ethan heard the vibration before he opened his eyes. Madison's voice filled the room with a shaky mix of confusion and panic. She asked why he left, why he didn't come back with the pen, why he didn't say goodbye. He deleted the message without responding. The second voicemail arrived minutes later. Her tone was tighter, faster, almost rehearsed. She said her parents were worried and wanted to finish the conversation. Ethan let it play in the background while he made coffee. Then he silenced his phone and walked away. But the messages didn't stop. They multiplied. By noon, he had over 30 missed calls. Madison's voice swung between concern, guilt-tripping, and forced sweetness. Her father's messages were colder. He spoke with the authority of someone refusing to lose control. He demanded an explanation. He insisted that family agreements are not optional. Ethan replayed those words just once before deleting the voicemail. By the end of the day, the tone changed again. The politeness vanished. The begging turned into accusations. Her mother left a message accusing Ethan of destabilizing the household structure. Her father claimed Ethan had broken a verbal contract. Madison cried into the phone, saying he embarrassed her in front of her family. She begged him to fix the mess he created. Ethan sat on his couch, letting the messages play out like distant noise. 48 hours passed. The calls were relentless. He stopped counting at 70. Some messages were emotional spirals. Some were thinly veiled threats. Some were desperate financial hints that revealed more than they intended. Madison's father demanded repayment for wedding costs that Ethan never approved. Her mother claimed Ethan owed them money for time invested. One voicemail made Ethan pause. Madison whispered that her family was falling apart without the financial plan. She said they needed the structure, needed the stability, needed him, not as a partner, as the lifeline they had built their fantasies on. Ethan deleted that one slower than the others. But he still deleted it. On the third morning, his inbox reached its breaking point. Voicemails poured in with no pattern, no restraint, no dignity. Madison screamed that he ruined her future. Her father threatened legal action. Her mother insisted he return the gifts they had given, none of which existed. Another call accused him of abandoning his responsibilities. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, listening to the chaos spiral into incoherence. The desperation in their voices revealed everything he needed to know. This was never about love. It was never about marriage. It was about money. His money. And now that he was gone, their entire structure was collapsing. He turned his phone off completely and placed it face down on the table. For the first time in days, the silence felt clean. He took a long breath, steady and unshaken. Their world was falling apart. His was finally beginning to rebuild. The request for the ring came after Ethan finally turned his phone back on. He didn't call Madison. He didn't call her parents. He simply sent a short message asking for the return of the engagement ring. A gift given with the expectation of marriage. A gift that legally must be returned if the engagement ended. He expected anger. He expected excuses. But he didn't expect the truth that followed. Madison replied with a single trembling text. "We don't have it anymore." Ethan stared at the message, waiting for clarification. It came seconds later. "My mom sold it. She didn't tell me until now." His hands froze above the screen. He asked her why. The answer hit harder than any voicemail. They needed money to cover the cancellation fee at the tasting event. The words were clumsy, desperate, blurred with panic. Ethan asked what fee she was talking about. Madison explained with hesitation, so slow it felt like confession. Her family had scheduled a high-end tasting at a luxury venue without telling him. The fee for missing the reservation was $4,000. They didn't have the money to pay it. So her mother sold the ring. The ring Ethan bought with months of saving. The ring he chose carefully. The ring that symbolized a future he thought was real. His vision blurred at the edges as the truth landed. They hadn't just used him. They had liquidated his gift like it was an asset in their debt plan. He asked where the money went. Madison hesitated again, then admitted her parents were behind on several payments. They were drowning financially long before he appeared. He wasn't marrying Madison. He was marrying their debt. Ethan's calm shattered into something colder. He replied with one final message. "I'm filing a police report and a civil claim." Madison's response was instant and frantic. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said they intended to buy a replacement ring. She said her mother panicked. She said anything she could think of to slow him down. But nothing changed the fact that selling the ring was illegal. It was property given conditionally, and they sold it without permission. Ethan gathered every document he had. Photos of the ring, the receipt, the certificate, the text messages. He organized them into the same folder he'd created days earlier. His hands moved with the certainty of someone who'd finally reached the line he refused to cross. He drove to the police station. The officer listened quietly as Ethan explained the situation. When he presented the evidence, the officer nodded with slow understanding. A report was filed. A case was opened. The process had officially begun. As Ethan walked out of the station, the evening air felt heavier than before. Not painful, not overwhelming, just final. They had taken the ring, but they were about to learn what it cost to steal something that wasn't theirs. The legal process unfolded faster than Madison's family expected. Ethan filed a civil claim, demanding the full value of the ring. $18,000, documented down to the last cent. His attorney advised him to prepare for backlash. He was more than ready. Within a week, Madison's family responded with a lawsuit of their own. They accused Ethan of emotional harm, wedding disruption, financial damages totaling $130,000. The claim was outrageous, but it revealed exactly how far they were willing to go. Ethan gathered every piece of evidence he had saved. Voicemails dripping with threats, texts filled with demands, screenshots of bank withdrawals they attempted before he escaped, copies of contracts he canceled alone. Every document was a puzzle piece, exposing their intentions. His attorney organized the evidence into a clean timeline, a timeline that destroyed their narrative completely. The mediation day arrived in a small conference room downtown. Ethan walked in calm, steady and silent. Madison's parents sat across the table with stiff smiles. Madison looked pale, her confidence cracked at the edges. Their attorney started with a speech about abandonment and broken promises. Ethan didn't interrupt. He waited until they finished listing every accusation like a script they rehearsed too many times. Then his attorney opened the evidence folder. Piece by piece, the truth filled the room. The financial contract they tried to force on him. The voicemails demanding control of his income. The threats disguised as family values. The admission that the ring had been sold without consent. The text messages proving the sale was used to cover their unpaid bills. Madison's father shifted uncomfortably as each document hit the table. Her mother's face tightened with every audio clip played. Madison buried her face in her hands as her own words echoed in the speakers. The mediator paused several times, stunned by the clarity of the evidence. When the last voicemail ended, the room fell silent. Not a single accusation made by Madison's family held up. Not one. Their attorney's confidence collapsed into something strained and brittle. He whispered urgently with them, but their expressions said everything. They were cornered. They were exposed. They were out of leverage. The mediator turned to Ethan's side with a calm voice. He said the evidence overwhelmingly supported Ethan's claim. He recommended full repayment. He also reminded Madison's family that selling conditional property could escalate into criminal charges. The color drained from Madison's mother's face. Her father glared at the table as if it had betrayed him. Madison whispered an apology too soft to carry across the room. Ethan didn't respond. He wasn't there for reconciliation. He was there for justice. By the end of the session, the decision was unavoidable. They would repay the full value of the ring. They would drop their lawsuit. And they would do so immediately to avoid further consequences. Ethan left the room with quiet steps. Behind him, a family built on manipulation unraveled under the weight of their own lies. The agreement to repay the $18,000 was only the beginning. Madison's family left the mediation room with stiff shoulders and hollow expressions. Ethan didn't look back as he walked to the elevator. He didn't need to. He could feel the collapse happening behind him. Their quiet footsteps told the whole story. A family that once spoke with authority now moved like they were afraid of their own shadows. The next morning, Ethan received an email from their attorney. A short message confirming that payment would be made within 7 days. No apology. No explanation. Just compliance. But compliance came with a price they never expected to pay. By day 3, rumors began to reach him through mutual acquaintances. Madison's father had visited 2 banks. Both denied his loan applications. The family's debt was deeper than anyone knew. Their credit was fractured, their savings almost gone. They had hidden their financial problems for years behind expensive clothes and practiced smiles. But without Ethan's income, the facade crumbled fast. Ethan heard they tried, borrowing from relatives. Most said no. Some said they were tired of helping. Some said they knew something like this would eventually happen. By day 5, the truth spread quietly around their neighborhood. A home long praised for its stability was suddenly marked with whispers. Not about scandal, but about desperation. Madison's mother was seen arguing with a loan officer in the parking lot. Madison's father paced outside their house late at night, talking on the phone with rising frustration. Madison stayed inside most days, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. Ethan didn't take pleasure in any of it, but he didn't feel pity either. They had built their world on manipulation. Now they were crushed under the weight of their own choices. On the 7th day, the payment finally arrived. A wire transfer. $18,000 exactly. Along with a brief note. Payment completed, no further contact. Ethan saved the confirmation and closed his laptop with a steady breath. It was over. Hours later, he heard the final piece of their downfall. Madison's parents had taken out a second mortgage on their home. It was the only way they could pay him without risking criminal charges. Their house, once their pride, was now collateral. A symbol of the price they paid for greed. Ethan sat quietly in his living room as evening light washed over the walls. He felt no triumph, just closure. A clean, solid ending to a chapter that nearly swallowed him. He thought of the life he almost stepped into. A life where his income was controlled, his choices monitored, his freedom traded for approval. He imagined what would have happened if he had signed that contract. The thought chilled him, but he had walked away. He had protected himself. He had reclaimed his autonomy before it was too late. As night settled, he allowed himself a long, calm breath. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't hurt. He was simply free. Their world had collapsed. His had finally begun. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, letting the quiet settle around him. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. He reviewed the final receipts and closed the folder that had defined his life for weeks. He had lost nearly 4 months, and more money than he cared to admit. But he had gained something worth far more. His autonomy. His clarity. His future. He opened the window and let the cold air drift in. It didn't sting the way it once did. It felt like a reset. The past had taken its toll, but it hadn't taken him. He walked through his apartment with a steadiness he didn't recognize at first. Then he understood. He was no longer waiting for the next crisis. No longer bracing for manipulation disguised as love. He was rebuilding from solid ground. And he was doing it alone, on his own terms. He turned off the lights and stood in the doorway for a moment. Tomorrow would come, and he would meet it without fear. Not as someone's asset. Not as someone's solution. Just himself, free and whole again.